Someone just said something that hits you like a punch to the chest. You feel your blood rising. Every muscle tightens. Every thought races to one single point: how to hit back. All eyes are on you. The room is holding its breath, waiting for the explosion. You could tear them apart with a few sharp words. You could prove them wrong, humiliate them, show everyone that you will not be disrespected. But then, something inside you pauses. A quiet voice, older than anger itself, whispers, "The strong don't win by shouting, they win by staying composed." Because real power isn't in domination. It's in control. The greatest warriors, philosophers, and leaders throughout history knew this truth. The one who masters their reaction rules every outcome. This isn't about being submissive. It's not about letting people walk over you. It's about holding the truest form of strength, the ability to remain calm when every part of you wants to fight. Today, I won't teach you how to argue. I'll teach you how to end conflict without fighting, how to protect your dignity, disarm aggression, and sometimes even turn an enemy into an ally. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best answer to anger is silence." And the Stoics, masters of composure, built entire philosophies around that idea. Across 2,000 years, they developed timeless responses that turn chaos into order and hostility into understanding. Today, I'll share 5 of those responses, the ones that still work word for word in our modern world. Each one is a small act of wisdom. The third one, especially, is a quiet weapon. It turns insults into self-exposure, forcing aggressors to reveal more about themselves than about you. So take a breath, stay with me. Because by the end of this, you'll see that control isn't about winning arguments, it's about mastering yourself. Let's begin. Response 1. I see your point. Help me. Understand your reasoning. The sharpest weapon against aggression isn't sarcasm, it isn't dominance or clever comebacks. It's curiosity, genuine, calm, disarming curiosity. When someone attacks your ideas or your character, they expect you to fight back. They've mentally prepared for a battle, not a conversation. So when you respond with sincere interest, I see your point. Help me understand your reasoning. You break their pattern entirely. You shift from emotional reaction to rational inquiry. I remember a tense meeting years ago. I had spent weeks preparing a project proposal, detailed research, expert opinions, everything. Halfway through my presentation, a colleague suddenly interrupted and said, "You're completely out of touch with reality. It's clear you don't understand the market." Instant heat. My pulse jumped. My first instinct was to defend my work, to prove him wrong, to protect my pride. But instead, I took a slow breath and said, "I see your point, David. Can you help me understand your reasoning? Which parts seem unrealistic to you?" The room froze. Everyone turned to him. And then he started stumbling. "Well, I mean, generally speaking." He searched for words, fumbled, and eventually admitted he hadn't actually read the full proposal. He'd just reacted to the summary. That's the power of this response. It forces emotion into logic. When someone is pressed to explain their criticism, they often realize they have no real foundation for it. Socrates, a thinker deeply admired by the Stoics, mastered this art. He once said, "The only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing." This response carries that same spirit. It says, "I'm open to learning." Are you? You maintain humility, but in doing so, you also reveal the lack of it in others. And here's the psychological twist. By asking questions, you quietly take control. They now have to defend their position, not you. Aggressive criticism usually comes from emotion, not logic. So by inviting explanation, you force them to engage their rational mind, and often they expose the weakness of their argument themselves. But tone is everything. If your voice carries sarcasm or superiority, this backfires. You must sound genuinely curious, genuinely calm, as if you truly want to understand. Use it when someone throws vague insults. You're unrealistic. You're naive. You don't get it. Most people like to judge without substance. This question forces them into the uncomfortable territory of specifics, and there, truth becomes visible. And sometimes, surprisingly, you'll find they do have a valid point. That's when the second Stoic response becomes vital. Response 2. You're absolutely right, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Sometimes the fastest way to win is to surrender, not the surrender of weakness, but of wisdom. When someone points out a real flaw, a genuine mistake, most people's instinct is to defend. We scramble for excuses. We explain. We justify. But the Stoics knew that defensiveness is just fear in disguise, fear of being seen as imperfect. The truth is, everyone makes mistakes. What separates the strong from the fragile is what happens next. Do you fight for your ego, or do you act for improvement? Let me tell you about a moment I'll never forget. I was in a client meeting, surrounded by my entire team. We'd been working with this client for 6 months, and tensions were high. Right in the middle of the discussion, the client looked straight at me and said, "Your team has missed the deadline again. This is becoming a serious pattern, and frankly, it's affecting our confidence in your ability to deliver." The words hit like stones. Everyone turned to me. I could feel my team waiting for me to defend us, to explain the delays, to shift the blame. And honestly, I could have. We had legitimate reasons, scope changes, technical issues, resource shortages. But instead, I looked at the client and said, calmly, "You're absolutely right, and here's what I'm going to do about it." I told them I was implementing a new tracking system that same week. That I'd personally oversee progress and send weekly updates. That this project, the one we were discussing, would be completed by a revised, mutually agreed deadline. The energy in the room changed instantly. Their anger melted, their tone softened. The conversation shifted from confrontation to collaboration. Suddenly, we weren't opponents anymore, we were partners, solving a problem together. That's what this response does. It takes the wind out of the critic's sails because it gives them what they truly wanted: action. Most people criticize not because they want to hurt, but because they want to be heard. They want the problem to be fixed. When you accept responsibility and act decisively, you transform frustration into respect. Psychologically, this response is powerful because it does the opposite of what most expect. People prepare for resistance. They prepare to be argued with. When instead you calmly agree and follow it with clear, solution-focused action, you disarm them completely. It also signals emotional maturity. You're showing that your identity isn't threatened by being wrong. In fact, you're strong enough to face truth and act on it. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." When you take full ownership of your mistakes without defensiveness, you embody wisdom. You prove that self-control and humility are stronger than pride. But there's a crucial rule here. Only use this response when the criticism is valid. If someone is unfairly attacking you or projecting their own frustrations, this response won't fit. The power lies in your discernment, the ability to recognize when someone's anger contains truth. When it does, immediate acknowledgement is transformative. It ends the conflict before it begins. It tells the other person, "You're seen, you're heard, and I'm taking this seriously." And most people, when they feel heard, no longer need to fight. The Stoics believed that integrity is the highest form of defense. When you take responsibility, your actions become your shield. No argument can stand against sincerity. And something else happens too. When you respond this way, you model leadership. You set a tone for everyone watching. In that meeting with my client, my team didn't just see me manage a crisis. They saw how humility commands more authority than pride ever could. That's how this response turns critics into collaborators and witnesses into believers. It shifts the entire narrative from blame to progress. Now, of course, not every attack you face comes from legitimate feedback. Sometimes people don't want resolution, they just want reaction. They want to provoke you, to pull you into the mud, to feel powerful by watching you lose control. When that happens, the wise don't fight fire with fire, they turn the mirror around. And that's where the third Stoic response reveals its quiet brilliance. Response 3. That's an interesting perspective. What made you think of it? This is elegance disguised as curiosity. When someone makes a provocative or insulting remark, instead of reacting, you calmly ask why. You give them space to expose their intention. You let their own words reveal their motive or their ignorance. I saw this once at a dinner party. A friend of mine, Rachel, is a freelance graphic designer. She's built her career from nothing, a decade of hard work, long nights, and countless clients. During that dinner, a man she'd just met said, half smirking, "Freelancing must be nice." Basically getting paid to play around on a computer all day without any real responsibility. Everyone felt the sting. It was meant to belittle her. But Rachel didn't flinch. She smiled and said, "That's an interesting perspective. What made you think of it?" The man froze. He blinked. "Well, I mean, it just seems like..." He stumbled, fumbled, finally admitted, "I guess I don't really know what freelance design involves." The whole table saw it, the elegance of her response and the self-exposure of his ignorance. She didn't need to defend her profession. Her calm curiosity did all the work. That's the art of Stoic conversation. When others reveal who they are, you don't need to say a thing. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This response embodies that perfectly. While they try to pull you into pettiness, you stay grounded in dignity. The contrast is visible to everyone and unforgettable. Rachel's response that night was more than polite, it was powerful. Her calm curiosity turned an insult into a revelation. That's what makes the third Stoic response such a quiet masterpiece. It transforms confrontation into reflection. When someone attacks, mocks, or belittles you, their goal is simple: they want to provoke. They want to drag you into their emotional arena, because once you react, they've won. But by responding with, "That's an interesting perspective. What made you think of it?" you step outside their battlefield entirely. You're not denying their comment, nor accepting it. You're redirecting it, forcing them to examine the foundation beneath their words, and, most of the time, there is no foundation. You've given them the spotlight and suddenly everyone sees there's nothing standing there. This technique works because it appeals to the higher mind. Aggression lives in impulse. Curiosity lives in intellect. When you bring curiosity into the room, the temperature drops. You change the rhythm of the interaction. Instead of emotional escalation, there's a pause, and in that pause, clarity walks in. But here's the subtle art. Your tone must be pure. If it carries even a hint of sarcasm, it becomes an attack. Deliver it with the same ease you'd use in a genuine question, open, grounded, a little detached. Let the words do the work. This response is especially powerful in social or professional environments. At a dinner table, in a meeting, in a heated online debate, everywhere people expect you to defend yourself, you instead invite them to explain themselves. That invitation can be more devastating than any counter-argument. The reason is psychological. Most verbal aggression comes from insecurity. When someone feels small, they inflate themselves by putting you down. But when you respond calmly and ask them to justify their view, you take away their emotional fuel. They can't play the dominant role anymore because you've refused to play the submissive one. The dynamic collapses, and often they retreat confused, even embarrassed. Marcus Aurelius taught that the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy. That's exactly what's happening here. They shout, you inquire. They assume, you investigate. They react, you reflect. You rise above the game so quietly that everyone watching feels the difference. Now, this response doesn't just expose hostility, it can transform it. Sometimes, when you invite someone to explain themselves, they realize they've been unfair. Their defensiveness softens. What started as an attack becomes a moment of humility, and when that happens, something remarkable occurs. The enemy turns into an ally. The Stoics believed that reason is contagious. If you remain calm long enough, it spreads to others. Your composure becomes a mirror, showing them what dignity looks like. But not every person will respond to reason. Some people are too angry, too proud, or too wounded to think clearly. No matter how composed you are, they'll keep pushing, criticizing, or shouting. When that happens, logic alone won't work. You need something softer, but paradoxically, stronger. That's where the fourth response comes in. Response 4. I appreciate you sharing that with me. These 6 words can melt hostility like ice in the sun. When you're met with anger, rudeness, or accusation, your instinct is to defend yourself. But instead, you disarm them with gratitude. 2 years ago, I learned this lesson the hard way. I'd recently adopted a rescue dog. He was sweet, loyal, but anxious, and when I left for work, he barked for hours. I had no idea until one evening my neighbor stormed across the yard, red-faced, shouting, "Your dog is driving the whole neighborhood crazy. It's non-stop barking from 6 in the morning." Some of us are ready to call animal control. Every part of me wanted to push back. I wanted to explain, to defend, to point out that he could have spoken more politely, but something in me held still. I took a breath and said, "I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I had no idea this was happening, and I'm honestly glad you told me directly instead of letting the frustration build." The change was instant. His shoulders loosened, his tone softened. He blinked, taken off guard. Within seconds, he went from furious neighbor to helpful ally. He told me about his sister's dog trainer, offered advice, and gave me his number to text if the barking continued. A potential feud turned into collaboration. That's the psychology behind gratitude. It's unexpected. People rehearse arguments in their minds before confronting you. They prepare for excuses, denial, or anger. When you respond with appreciation, you tear up their mental script. They no longer know how to play their role. Gratitude signals security. It says, "You can criticize me, and I'll still remain grounded." It reframes the conversation from me versus you to us fixing a problem. And more often than not, the other person will rise to meet the tone you set. Seneca once wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." In conflict, gratitude is that new beginning. It ends the cycle of blame and starts the process of cooperation. This response works best when the person confronting you has a legitimate concern but expresses it poorly. They might be rude, but beneath their frustration lies truth. By thanking them for bringing it up, you acknowledge the truth while ignoring the rudeness. That subtle separation changes everything. And here's the beauty. You don't just calm the other person, you calm yourself. By choosing gratitude, you remind your nervous system that you're not in danger. You shift from fight or flight into peace and agency. You act rather than react. But what about the people who don't soften? What about those moments when someone's goal isn't communication but humiliation, when they attack in front of others, trying to make you small? That's where words alone may not be enough. That's when silence itself becomes a weapon. Next comes the fifth and final Stoic response, the one that uses stillness as strength. Silent pause, and then, thank you for that insight. Response 5. A silent pause, followed by, thank you for that insight. Sometimes, the most powerful response is no response at all. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of command, the kind of silence that makes the whole room lean forward. When someone says something cruel, unfair, or outrageous, your words will rarely change them, but your composure will. Change everyone watching. This is the final level of Stoic strength. It's the moment when you decide that someone's insult is not an invitation, it's simply noise. 3 years ago, I was pitching a new marketing strategy to a room full of executives. Halfway through, one of my competitors interrupted me. He leaned back in his chair, smirking, and said loudly, "I'm not sure we can trust marketing advice from someone with such limited experience. Maybe we should hear from someone who actually knows what they're talking about." The comment cut through the room like a knife. Everyone froze. The energy shifted. That's the moment when adrenaline hits, the pulse quickens, the mind races, the ego screams, "Defend yourself." But instead, I did something else. I stopped speaking. I looked directly at him. 3 long seconds passed, just silence, heavy enough for everyone to feel it. Then I said, calmly, "Thank you for that insight." The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. His smirk faded. The insult, which had seemed bold a moment ago, now hung in the air like smoke, exposing itself as petty and unprofessional. I didn't need to fight him. The contrast between his behavior and mine did all the work. Later, several people came up to me privately to apologize for his remark. We ended up winning the contract. Not because my presentation was perfect, but because I showed what leadership under pressure looks like. The Stoics would say that, in that moment, I chose control over chaos. And that's the essence of this fifth response. It's not about outsmarting anyone. It's about showing everyone, including yourself, that nothing outside your mind has power over you. The pause is crucial. It creates a mirror. In those few seconds, the aggressor hears their own words echo back at them, uncomfortably clear. They realize what they've just revealed about themselves, not about this. Works because silence magnifies truth. It gives space for the weight of someone's behavior to settle in the minds of everyone present. And by thanking them afterwards, you make it unmistakably clear that their words didn't wound you, they merely passed through you. But there's a delicate balance here. Your tone matters more than your words. If you sound sarcastic or smug, it becomes a trap. You look petty instead of powerful. Deliver it with calm sincerity, almost as if you're genuinely acknowledging their input. That's what makes it unshakable. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When you use silence as your shield, you embody that truth. You show that while others are ruled by impulse, you are guided by discipline. And here's the deeper psychology behind it. When you pause instead of reacting, you interrupt the pattern of emotional contagion. Anger, like fire, spreads through reaction. Silence deprives it of oxygen. It dies on its own. People remember that kind of composure. It's magnetic. In a world addicted to outrage, the person who stays calm becomes the one in control of the room, of the tone, of the narrative. This fifth response doesn't just win you respect, it trains your nervous system for mastery. Each time you hold silence instead of striking back, you strengthen the inner muscle that keeps you unshakable. You teach your mind that calm is not weakness, it's command, and over time, this discipline seeps into every part of your life. You start noticing the difference between noise and signal, between provocation and principle. You stop taking the bait. You stop trying to win every argument because you realize that the only argument worth winning is the one inside your own head. This doesn't mean you let people mistreat you. It means you choose your battles with intention. You can always respond later when you decide the time and tone. But in that moment when the heat is highest, silence gives you space to remain sovereign. Silence doesn't mean absence. It's an act, a choice. It says, I see what's happening, but I refuse to become it. And that's the ultimate Stoic victory, when you no longer need to prove yourself through reaction. Because dignity, once mastered, speaks louder than any argument. Stillness, Marcus Aurelius wrote, is not the absence of movement, but the mastery of motion. It's knowing when to act and when not to, when to speak and when silence says everything. And in that space of restraint, something profound happens. The people who came to test your patience end up respecting your peace. They may not admit it, but they feel it, the quiet authority of someone who cannot be provoked. That's why this fifth response is the crown of Stoic dialogue. It's not just about winning respect from others. It's about earning respect from yourself. Because every time you choose silence over reactivity, you're proving to your own mind that you are no longer a slave to anger. You're free. Now that we've explored all 5 Stoic responses, the story isn't quite finished. The final part ties them together, revealing how these lessons transform not only your interactions with others, but your entire inner life. When you look at these 5 Stoic responses side by side, something becomes clear. None of them are really about the other person. They are all about you. They are about who you become in the moment of pressure, in the split second between stimulus and response, that sacred gap where your character is built. Anyone can look wise when life is easy. True composure shows itself when someone attacks you, misjudges you, or tries to pull you into the mud, and you simply refuse to go there. That's the real heart of Stoic philosophy, not escaping emotion, but mastering. The Stoics never said, don't feel. They said, don't be ruled by what you feel. And each of these responses is a small, practical act of that mastery. When you say, I see your point, help me understand your reasoning, you turn conflict into conversation. You choose curiosity over pride. When you say, you're absolutely right, and here's what I'm going to do about it, you replace defensiveness with action, showing humility as strength. When you ask, that's an interesting perspective. What made you think of it? You shine a light on ignorance without a single harsh word. When you say, I appreciate you sharing that with me, you disarm anger with gratitude and change confrontation into cooperation. And when you pause, look them in the eye and say, thank you for that insight. You prove that silence can be sharper than any sword. Each one of these is a different instrument, but they all play the same melody, self-control. The Stoics believed that we cannot control what others say or do. We can only control how we respond. Epictetus taught that our power lies not in circumstances, but in perception. He said, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things." That line is more than 2,000 years old, yet it feels like it was written for this century, the age of constant reaction, instant outrage, endless noise. In a world that rewards impulsiveness, restraint becomes revolutionary. Everyone is arguing, defending, shouting to be heard. And then, amid that chaos, someone stays calm. That person doesn't seem weak, they seem unshakable. Composure, in this world, is charisma, and it's contagious. Think about it. The people who inspire you most are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who stay grounded when everything around them trembles. They carry a certain stillness that doesn't need to announce itself. That's the energy you cultivate through these responses. You stop reacting to every slight, every insult, every misunderstanding. You start responding with clarity, with purpose, with peace. And slowly, your presence begins to change the people around you. The colleague who used to challenge you stops looking for fights. The client who once doubted you starts trusting your word. The friend who once lashed out begins to speak more thoughtfully, not because you lectured them, but because you modeled composure. That's the quiet leadership the Stoics lived by. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the largest empires in history, yet his journal, the Meditations, reads like the reflections of a man fighting not others, but himself. He wrote reminders to stay calm when insulted, to forgive easily, to focus on what he could control and let go of what he could not. That's the paradox of Stoicism. The most powerful person is the one who masters their inner world. The Stoics understood that anger is easy. Anyone can lash out, defend, or belittle. But grace under pressure, that's the rarest form of strength. When you respond with composure, you teach people how to treat you. When you refuse to engage in pettiness, you redefine the terms of the conversation. And when you maintain dignity, you remind everyone, including yourself, that your peace is not negotiable. Every reaction is a declaration of who you are. You don't control what they say, but you control what you become because of it. So the next time someone says something that makes your blood boil, stop. Let that pause be your power. In that breath, decide who you want to be, the person controlled by emotion or the person guided by wisdom. Remember, you don't need to win the argument to win the moment. The Stoics never fought to prove themselves right. They acted to stay right within themselves. When you stay calm, you see more clearly. You listen better. You choose better words, better timing, better energy. You preserve not just your reputation, but your sanity. And here's the beautiful irony. When you no longer chase victory, it often comes to you. People start respecting your restraint. Your silence becomes its own kind of authority. You stop reacting and start directing. Because self-control is not the absence of feeling. It's the intelligent management of feeling. It's the art of letting emotions serve you instead of enslave you. That's the Stoic secret, and it's not ancient anymore. It's urgent. Every day you are tested. Online comments, office tension, family arguments, the small provocations that pull at your peace. Each one is an invitation to react or an opportunity to rise. So when the world pokes at your patience, smile inwardly, because you know the truth. No one controls your peace unless you hand it to them. The wise do not shout, they do not rush to defend. They win quietly, with composure. That's how you protect your dignity. That's how you build respect that lasts. And that's how you turn every confrontation into a classroom for the soul. Your reactions reveal your character. Choose them with care. If these ideas helped you find calm in the storm, share them not to prove you're right, but to spread what's rare: the power of reason, elegance, and self-mastery. The world doesn't need more loud voices. It needs more quiet strength. And that strength begins with a single breath, the breath you take before you respond.